Call to order a meeting for the Normal Town Council for Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Nord,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Cummings, here, Mr. Preston,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one public commenter prior to the meeting and one towards the end of the meeting. So our first speaker dealing with the agenda would be Carl Sela. You've been here enough, you know the drill.
Yep, thank you. Just as Illinois has a reputation of one of the most corrupt of these United States, Normal has a reputation for seeking to prevent the little guy from participating in the political process in town governments. They had a public comment policy that was illegal because it effectively prevented citizens from speaking to power. And they adopted an updated policy that was also illegal. Now you've finally reached a sweet spot in that policy that follows the letter of the law, but still discourages people from bringing their grievances to be part of the public record. Then there was the public input forum that was intended to be by invitation only, the 4,000 plus signature to save the mural that the council simply dismissed as not valid input, or ignoring public input that was something like 60-1 against introducing alcohol sales to a part of town dominated by parks, schools, and other children's activities. And of course, the bullying of dissenting voices here on the council. And these are only the highlights since I've become politically aware of town governance. Given all this, it's no wonder the majority of town employees choose to live outside of Normal. So like me, I'm sure you've noticed the last few election cycles, there are more and more signs for more and more candidates that challenge the status quo power structure. I know it's hard to break with your tradition, and I'm largely wasting my breath, but I'd still like to speak for a lot of little guys and urge you not to give this anti-democracy sign regulation your stamp of approval. Thank you.
We move to the Omnibus Agenda, items that will be taken with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. Mr. Nord?
C through G.
Motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Items on the omnibus tonight are approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 6th, 2022, approval of the minutes of the work session special meeting of June 20th, 2022, and approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 20th, 2022, and a report to receive and file Town of Normal expenditures for payment as of June 30th, 2022. Please call roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings. Aye. Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Coos.
Aye. Those items are approved. Item C is a resolution to approve executive session minutes to release executive session minutes from February 7th, 2022 and April 4th, 2022, and to retain confidentiality for executive session minutes from June 19th, 2017, February 18th, 2019, April 15th, 2019, June 21st, 2021, and June 6th, 2022. Mr. Nord.
I so moved.
Second. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. My first question is, or I guess this is a comment before I get to my question. Council, tonight we were only able to review, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes that we were to approve. We've only been presented 3 to approve. So the other ones, you're just gonna have to rely on your memory is the assumption, which, I would ask next time, bring us all of them so we have the chance to review everything that we're going to either approve or not approve, so we don't have to rely on our memory as to what we talked about back in, 3 years ago. And then my question then is, the ones that are being released to the public, where will those be put so the public can review the minutes and the recordings?
Sure, I'll respond to that, Mr. Nord. In terms of where minutes are located, they are placed on our website with council minutes. So all the executive session minutes that are posted are with, or that have been released, are posted with council meeting minutes.
And will they be posted with the date that's on the minutes that we're approving?
They'll be posted as you see them.
Okay, so somebody has to go back a couple of years to look for those minutes.
Well, they'll see this agenda item, and then if they read the sessions that have been released, that particular date will be posted when that meeting occurred.
Okay, and then what about the audio recordings?
I don't know what happens to audio recordings, honestly. I'm
The
gonna
audio
look at,
recordings aren't released to the public. Those are automatically terminated 180 days after the,
can't hear you, Mr. Day.
I think I need a longer microphone stand or a smaller midsection. The minutes, the audio recording under the Open Meetings Act are not released to the public. Those are terminated within, I believe it's 180 days after the release of the minutes.
Are they available for the public to request?
No. No, they're exempt from FOIA under the Open Meetings Act.
Even after we've released them? Well, I did not realize that, because that puts the public, I mean, they can question the minutes. The minutes are not an exact transcribe of what we spoke about. Just like our minutes here tonight, we've been told many a times that it's not supposed to be an exact transcription and that they can always go to the video. So I don't know if that's true. I'm just going to take your word that that's what the OMA says. I think it's bad policy that the state put forward. All right, those are the only questions I have.
If I could just jump in, the first comment you made was an inquiry or a statement regarding the minutes of past meetings where we are not releasing them tonight. We're asking council to retain those executive session minutes. That would be from 2017, 2019, and 2021. And all council has reviewed those minutes. They were reviewed in the past. We just did not include them in this file folder this evening because we're asking to retain them for the same reason that council retained them previously. Certainly understand the request. I'll have to work with council then. If council wants to see every set of minutes, then we're going to have to get together earlier for you to review them prior to the meeting if you want to review them every 6 months.
I've got one more comment. I can use my second time. Just for example, in the minutes that we're approving tonight, just our regular council meeting minutes, a common response that's here is whenever we have a discussion, it could be Councilmember Nord asked whatever the question is, that's usually stated, but then it says City Manager Pamela Reese responded or so-and-so responded. The public never gets to hear that recourse as to what the response was. So the minutes literally could be Mayor Coos asked a question, and then go down the list and say Stan Nord responded, everybody responded, but there's no transparency. There's no transparency to the public as to what that was about. Thank you.
Further on this item? Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks. Just to address that for just a second, I believe that's why we're reviewing these minute notes, to agree or disagree as a body, whether we think those are accurate and ready to be released. So I think the minutes go through a very public process to help ensure that there's transparency, and when we're able to release them, that they're released and accurate. Thanks.
Further on the item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye. That item is approved. Item D is a motion to approve recommended Harman Arts Grants Award. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
So for this grant, is this money coming from an endowment, or where's this money coming from? What's the source?
The source is general fund. The line item is found in the budget impact section on the first page of the council report.
Okay, so these are taxpayer dollars, and these are all going towards art-related projects. Why is it not listed under cultural arts? That seems like the logical place to record art-related projects.
We could certainly consider budgeting for that in the future under cultural arts. We've just budgeted for it in our general expense line in a line item called special programs. So
Okay.
it comes out of the same account. Still would be general fund, just a different line item. So we can put it in cultural arts, or we can put it in general expense, which it's kind of 6 of 1.
So if it's 6 and 1, I've asked this question before and requested that it be put there before. Why has it not been put there then? If it's really something doesn't really matter to staff, why don't we put it there? Or why haven't you?
Well, the only thing I can say, I suppose, is if it came up during the budget work session, which I don't believe it did, but during the budget work session, we could talk about that as a group. If the council wants it in a different line, if it's better for people to understand the budget, if we moved it to a different department, then we can do that. I suppose it's just a topic that maybe came up during a council discussion like right now, and perhaps we should try to remember to talk about it during the budget review process.
Well, if this is something that staff doesn't mind, I've got no problem with it. I would like not to have us waste our time on this because there's so many other things to speak about. I'd just like to see it get moved over. And if there's a problem, just bring it forward and let us know why it would be bad to transparently just put this under cultural arts, because that's more staff level decision. I don't know that council should really be getting into the weeds other than just reporting it should be there. And if you have no issue, staff or council would be getting into the weeds as to what the issue would be.
I guess I'm not following. Council would still have to approve. I assume you're suggesting, based on what you're saying, you don't want council to approve the arts grants?
You said that it was 6 and 1/2 dozen the other, that it doesn't really matter. So
I'm
rather than waste
gonna
staff
interject here,
time,
and let's not
make
make
the
a mountain
decision.
out of a molehill.
Okay, then I'll move on to my next question. Since this is coming out of taxpayer pockets, this is not a grant. Where did the idea come from to call it the Harman Arts Grant? I mean, was this something that was just started back then? Did the council vote to do it? Are we going to have a Mayor Coos grant program? I mean, what is the nexus of the name?
I believe it's explained in the council report, in the background section of the council report, packet item page D-2.
Point of order, Mayor. What is the name of the program? Have anything to do with whether or not we approve this expense? It seems like we're on a wild goose chase, taking up staff time for no apparent reason. If there's a relevant point here, I'd hope my counterpart would make it. But we're talking about the history and the origin of the name of the grant. It's not related.
Point taken.
All right, when was this authorized?
I'm sorry?
When was this expense to be added onto the budget authorized?
Every time we ask council to approve the budget.
Okay, so not the entire council did not approve the budget, and we were told that as expenses came forward, we would have a chance to speak about them again, every expense. So this is why I think it's relevant that we can ask about this expense. Now, in the past, this was not $60,000. This is now, what is it?
60 this year.
It's 60, so it was $30,000 in the past, right?
Correct.
And now it's double.
That is correct, Mr. Nord. And during the budget review process, and I believe in my various conversations with council about this particular program, we explained that we recommended for fiscal year 22-23 to budget $60,000 for this program because it is very popular, and because we did not have this program for 2 years during the COVID experience. So many of these organizations went 2 years without the opportunity to seek funding support from us, and so we thought this year our budget can accommodate an expense of 60,000 rather than 30,000, which has historically been the amount. So during the budget process, council, the majority of council approved the budget, and the budget includes 60,000. If council chooses not to spend the full 60, in fact, we're recommending 58 something, then I suppose that's your choice. But this is hopefully not a surprise because we've talked about it numerous times during the budget process.
Okay, and whenever we did have these tough times, we were told that we were making cuts and that this would be to help the budget so taxpayers wouldn't see such a hit. The Harman Arts Grant
Bernard, I'm
was
going
one of
to
those.
shut this conversation down.
And
We're not
now
gonna have
we're
that
spending it.
conversation tonight.
This is about the financing
This
of
is a
the,
conversation we can have in our strategic retreat later this year, but we're not going to resolve the Harman Arts Grant. I will just interject that I'm going to ask that we raise it from the $30,000. So there's a difference of opinions between the two of us. But here tonight, we're to talk about approving
point of order,
the
point of order,
recommended.
point of order. You gave me the floor. Can I have the floor to speak without being interrupted? Because that's Robert's Rules of Order.
You may not, because I'm bringing up a point of order. We're here to talk about approval of the grant awards.
And I'm talking
And we're
about
going to
that.
have a discussion. If you want to have that discussion, we will have that discussion, but we're not having it tonight.
Do I still have the floor or have you pulled it?
You have the floor unless you continue this line of conversation.
Okay. So this is more money than what the public was told.
No, it's not.
And we're not seeing
not
the
true, Mr.
savings.
Nord.
So
That's
You're out
not
of order,
true.
Mr.
we're
Nord.
not seeing the savings that we were promised.
You're out of order, Mr. Nord. Further on this,
I've got one more question about this.
I'm going to go over here and then we'll come back.
Okay.
If you're gonna reserve the floor for him, I will yield. But I'm just gonna call the question at this point because we're going circular tonight. We're here to either approve the amount which is less than what was initially on the budget line when we were told about the Harman Arts Grant returning. So I feel like at this point, either we're gonna vote yes or we're gonna vote no on it and move on. Otherwise, it's a circular conversation that really should be had at our either next when we talk about budget again for next year or during our strategic planning. This is not the time to do it. We should not be governing from the dais.
I'm going to let Mr. Nord finish his comments, though. I didn't know that you were going to go that direction. So, Mr. Nord, you have the floor.
Thank you. So in the write-up, it says that the requirements, that the program has to take place within normal, that it's administered by non-for-profit organizations. You know, there has to be an event in order for them to get the funding. Well, as you said, they didn't have events in the past, but now we're giving them funding for events that did not happen. That is, I don't understand why we're doing that because we're doubling the money and you're saying it's because they didn't have a chance to get the money in the past, but they also didn't put on the events, the very reason we're giving them the money.
Okay. Well, the Harman Arts Grant Program, as we indicated in the council report, the funding for this year, first of all, I'm going to say, I don't know that anyone is going to debate that some of these not-for-profit agencies struggled in recent years through COVID. For those that survived COVID and want to continue to have programs and provide services to our community, this particular grant program, which is budgeted, is applying grant funds to projects, and you'll see the last paragraph under the background section of the report, packet page D-2. The maximum grant award is $5,000, and programs or projects receiving grant funds must take place between July 1, 2022 and June 30, 2023. So what we're asking council to do is authorize grants towards programs that are yet to come.
Further on this item?
I would like to make a motion to reduce the grant amount to 30,000, the traditional amount that we had before.
You would like to amend the,
I would like to amend the
you have a
motion.
motion to amend the funding, although we have committed to these people that they're going to get that funding, we'll certainly entertain your amendment. Is there
You
a second?
committed without
Is
council
there a
approval?
second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Further on this item, please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
No.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The item is approved. Item E is a resolution waiving formal bidding requirements and executing an agreement with Lucky LLC for fabrication and installation of the new Lucky Climber at the Children's Discovery Museum in an amount not to exceed $296,110 plus reimbursable expenses. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
In the write-up, it says that there's plus reimbursable expenses. The reimbursable expenses aren't given as to which ones they are. It's listed in the contract that it's outlined in section 3, but I could not find where section 3 had the reimbursables. So what are the reimbursables, and is that something that the CDM pays for? Is that something that taxpayers are expected to reimburse?
I'm going to take a look at Mr. Day to supplement my comments. I'm not exactly sure where in the contract it references reimbursable expenses.
It's PDF page 53. It's highlighted reimbursable expenses.
I don't have the PDF in front of me, but
And then the title of our vote tonight is...
E7? Expenses not included in this proposal are outlined, okay, E7, packet page E-7. So it indicates what qualifies for reimbursable expenses per the contract language. I will point out, though, that the project is covered by a grant. And so those reimbursable expenses are part of the contract, which is covered by a grant through IDNR? Yeah, Illinois Department of Natural Resources.
The motion that we're voting on says $296,110 plus reimbursable expenses. Are they paying for the plus part, or are local taxpayers?
I believe in the background section of the council report says all of these costs, in the prior sentence, it mentions reimbursable expenses, I believe. Shipping, travel expenses, things like that are all these costs are fully covered by the grant.
Okay, so we won't, okay, so taxpayers, local taxpayers aren't going to be looking at this or anything else. That's really the only question I had is there anything else? All right, then.
Mr. Nord, I'll add that was pretty clear in the packet, so I would encourage you to read your packet.
Well, we've seen other things before where staff time is not included or other things. I mean, the CDM staff, that is 100% paid by local taxpayers. So it's not really that clear. Then this is a no bid contract. In the past, we've had no bid contracts that have come before us where we found that staff have been on a board where they might be getting some financial kickback to that board, or in case of insurance, we find
Point
out
of
that
order.
town staff are actually working for the insurance
Point of
company.
order, Mr.
With
Nord
this-
is blatantly making statements that aren't true.
Is it-
In my opinion, slanderous statements, but point of order, it's just
All right, well,
beyond the pale.
we just released the minutes so the public can look at that and see if it's true or not. I mean, we've all had that conversation. But my question
It's a
is,
strong accusation, Mr. Nord. I would suggest that at a later meeting or in writing to the council, you back up that claim.
we had an executive session about it and those minutes were just released. So the public go and read them.
And Mr. Nord, those statements indicate that you were not, that your statements were not accurate. And again, your statements about staff are not accurate. So I'm going to ask you to focus on the issue at hand, which is the Lucky Climber contract, and what specifically can I help you with so that you can make a decision?
Okay. Are there any staff or members of the CDM board that have a financial relationship with any of the parties supplying the equipment, any of the services, or the grant? Any parties? Is there any financial relationship that would that the public would say, that looks questionable?
I will tell you this. Staff are taxpayers. The grant is a state of Illinois grant. That's about the closest relationship I can tell you that they are helping fund a state of Illinois grant, and they are administering the project. So staff is invested in terms of making the Children's Discovery Museum the best quality museum it can be. And so is the town vested in this project? Absolutely. Is staff participating in making sure this project is a success? Yes. Do they have any kind of investment in the Lucky client, the Lucky LLC? No.
Or the granting body?
Granting body,
IDNR.
state of Illinois.
Mr. Nord, that's the state of Illinois. We're all taxpayers. So I don't know where you want that line drawn.
Are any of them board of directors?
With the Illinois Department of Natural Resources.
Yes, or any of the granting bodies? Just yes, I mean,
No,
yes or
is
no?
any council member? I don't know. Do any of you have a relationship with IDNR? I don't know where the line stops.
Okay.
And if you're not comfortable with this, then you I guess council doesn't have to support this.
This is why
This
I'm
is-
asking, and since this is state of Illinois dollars, there's a code of personal conduct, which I assume rolls down. It's their team, which people can search that too. That it's to promote honest and ethical conduct and fair dealing. So that's what I'm doing, is just making sure that we're going to follow that as well, and that I've asked the question. If you say no, then
Sure, Mr. Nord,
Then
but I've
that's all
said
I'm
no
asking.
for months and months on various projects, and you don't seem to be willing to accept that. So in this particular matter, Lucky LLC is out of Killingsworth, Connecticut. Lucky LLC installed the first climber. We're asking them to install the replacement climber, and that's as far as it goes.
okay.
And if you're not comfortable with this, then I would encourage you to not support it.
I'm not asking the support. I'm asking if there's relationships.
And I've answered you.
Okay. Because the National Fitness Campaign, we had a relationship. Micah, we did. That's why I'm
Point of
asking the
order.
Mr.
question.
Nord,
The
that
National
also
Fitness Campaign has
been
nothing to do with
addressed
this topic.
multiple times. As I've said, I've addressed this with you for months. And I've answered your questions. And I believe if council chooses to support this issue or not, hopefully we're ready to move on.
Why was it not bid?
As explained in the council report, I believe, well, I'll go into a little more detail, apparently, and see if this is helpful. The Children's Discovery Museum, I would hope every council member has been inside the Children's Discovery Museum. When you walk in, above your head is a suspended structure. That is called a Lucky Climber. Lucky because that's the name of the artist that designed it and installed it. You won't find any other suspended climbing structures created by anyone else. Lucky, that's what they do at Lucky LLC. So, in order to have a replacement suspended structure, we contacted the company that installed this very unique piece that is not replicated anywhere else. So that is why we're asking council to waive the formal bidding process, incorporate our project with a business that knows what they're doing and can install a very exciting suspended structure at the Children's Discovery Museum.
So if Lucky Climber goes out of business after this is installed, who maintains it after that?
Well, Mr. Nord, we actually maintain it. We are maintaining it. We have it inspected occasionally, periodically. I don't know what the schedule is to make sure it's of its structural integrity. We maintain it. What we're looking at is a replacement piece. And let's see, the current piece is 15, 16 years old. So maybe in 15 or 16 years, maybe somebody else buys Lucky LLC. Maybe there's an alternative, a competitor that we might know about. But right now, this is it. And the procurement policy, in case we're going that direction, does provide for an opportunity for council to waive the formal bidding process, as we've discussed on numerous times, for occasions when there are single source for the item.
Okay.
That's why staff has made this recommendation.
Since this is CDM dollars that we're using, I'm not going to vote against it, but I would say, for the taxpayer's point of view, if this needs to be repaired and the company's out of business in years, because we've had it for 20 years so far, I don't think it's being good fiscal stewards to get involved with single source companies in case something were to ever happen that is out of our control. It puts the taxpayers in a bad situation where they may have to replace the entire thing prematurely because we can't get parts or we can't get things from that company.
Certainly hear the concern. I think that's all the more reason why we need to promote the Children's Discovery Museum, make sure it's as successful as possible, continues to be a venue of a destination where people want to go. And so we continue to be successful with fundraising through the foundation and as successful as we've been with securing grants. So just to be clear, while the statement has been that taxpayers are paying for this, I want to keep reminding council it is a state grant.
Ms. Lorenz.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if you would allow me to ask Mr. Nord a question, or if I can ask this question through you, and that is, has Mr. Nord ever been to see the Lucky Climber, and has he ever climbed on it?
I think we'll let that one go. Point taken. Mr. McCarthy?
Just for the record, under Exhibit 1 in our packet that everybody in the world has, under Section 2, compensation, it says the amount plus reimbursable expenses as described below. Then it goes on to say expenses for Lucky installation team, air and ground travel, lodging, meals, reimbursable as described here and in Section 5, terms and conditions. Meals and expenses shall be billed per diem as reimbursable based on the monthly federal GSA rates, the county in which the work is performed at the time. So it's very clearly spelled out in the packet materials what the reimbursable expenses are. Just want to make sure that was publicly corrected. Thank you.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item F is a resolution to appropriate $202,500 of motor fuel tax funds for the design of Franklin Avenue Bridge over the north branch of Sugar Creek Replacement Project. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord.
The MFT funds, what is the source of these dollars? Where do they come from? Is this the state's percentage of this fuel tax that they send to us?
Yes, motor fuel tax, and you'll see in the budget impact section of the council report, motor fuel tax, and it gives the line, starts with number 213. That is our share of the state's motor fuel tax.
Okay, and the motor fuel tax fund, that is only money coming from the state's motor fuel tax dollars, right?
Yes.
Okay, we don't put any general fund dollars in there or anything.
Not into the fund. Sometime we do projects where it has multiple funding sources, but the motor fuel tax fund is state motor fuel tax dollars.
Okay. And then in this section of creek, just upstream a little bit, we had replaced a bridge since I've been on council, and that bridge flooded because the water couldn't pass through it, bottlenecked. Will this stretch be widened because there's, arguably more water running through there than 80 years ago when it was built?
I would suspect it's going to be wider, but I can't say for certain. It just says the project improvements shall consist of design work required for replacing the existing structure, including new sewer, sidewalk, pavement, paved ditch, and other necessary appurtenances required to match the new structure. So, council will be authorizing the design for that new bridge.
Okay.
It hasn't been designed yet.
Then who do we ask? Because I want to make sure that gets designed. That flooded out, many, many homes. Mr. Kus, Mayor Kus, I know it was right down the street from your house, and when I went there, the resident said you had come, so I know you've seen what I'm talking about and the reason why I'm asking. I just want to make sure that if we're going to spend this money, that we do widen it because, we don't want to have this blocking it and, causing more water being backed up. So who do we ask to ensure that this is going to be looked at from?
Well, Mr.
Water
Nord, because
capacity.
this
From
is
water.
going into design, I think your point's taken. I don't think you can ask anybody for a project that's not yet been designed.
They don't have an idea if they're going to look for more water capacity or flow to go through it? I mean, that's, I think, a very high-level question.
It is very important to us that we make sure that we are preparing for the future and increase water flow. So,
Okay, that
absolutely.
bridge just upstream from there is one that we approved while I was on council, and it was not wide enough for the water to pass through. So, this happened in the past, and the question wasn't asked. Mayor Coos saw the impact of that. And now I just want to ask, who's the person that's going to be in charge of it? We just asked them to come out so they could say, yes, I heard, and we will incorporate that into the design.
I think that's been said, Mr. Nord, so we'll move on from that question.
And Ms. Reese, will you acknowledge that you will ask staff to make sure that that gets looked
Absolutely.
at?
Point of order,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. This is getting to be harassment.
It certainly is, Mr. McCarthy. Further on this item?
Yes, I call it point of personal privilege. When you say that I'm harassing because I'm asking staff to ensure that a bridge that's designed to let water pass under it isn't being built small enough that it's going to
Mr. Nord,
cause property damage.
Mr.
I
Nord,
take that personally.
Mr. Nord,
And I would
you're
ask
out.
that you take back the comment that this
you're
was
out of order.
harassment.
You are out of order. A point of personal privilege is not a vehicle by which you re-argue your point. Your
When a
point was
personal
taking-
attack has been made upon me,
Nord?
I believe that that's true. I can. That was a personal attack, and I resent it.
Noted.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and follow the decorum of the meeting and not respond to Mr. Nord's charge, but it was a point of order.
Point of order taken. So, further on this item. Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye. That item is approved. Item G is an ordinance accepting utility easements. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
So these easements are for water and sewer, is that correct?
Installation of water main and sewer main, yes, that's correct.
Okay. When I was reading through here, I didn't see any mention about an accommodation for Bloomington's water main that goes across there or any other utilities that are going across there. Will their easements be impacted by this?
No, we're not affecting Bloomington's existing easements at all. These are new easements for town of Normal public utilities.
Okay, so Bloomington's water main going to the plant will be fine. The town will not take action to sever it and then say, hey, Normal's the only option you have.
No, Mr. Nord, we've covered that before in terms of the water service covering Rivian and what this project is and what this project isn't.
Sure, which before it was explained that this was in anticipation of development down the road. This was not something that Rivian had requested. This was something that staff wanted to do.
Twofold. It's twofold. I can remind council that the water main is closing a dead-end loop, so it's looping the system, if we want to talk about what the project is. And then, of course, it's preparing for growth. And council, not too long ago, annexed 300-plus acres on the west side, so you know growth is pending.
Sure, and we didn't charge any tap-on fees or any normal customary fees for extending water and sewer because Rivian didn't ask for it. This was what, the town decided to do, correct?
That is absolutely correct, like we've talked about a few times.
Okay, then on packet page G5, the first page of the easement, we're doing this because of Rivian's request. It says Rivian desires extended utility service to the Rivian property. So now I'm at a loss because months ago when I brought this up, we were told Rivian didn't want this. And now you've said that you're right, the town staff have. But this easement says that Rivian desires this. I just don't know what to believe. And now the question is, normally the person wanting these utilities would share in some of the cost to have them extended. Are they going to be sharing in the cost of having this extended now?
Mr. Nord, I'm going to bring up some things to answer your question. We've had this discussion many times, and I know when you don't like the discussion, you consider it a discussion that never happened and want to have it again. This has been discussed multiple times at many council meetings. Now, we decided that we wanted to move forward on this project as a council because we strongly believe there will be development in that area and that is appropriate for development in that area. I don't think it's fair to say that Rivian is now wanting it and we don't.
It says
there
Rivian
should,
desires.
Mr. Nord, I'm speaking. The fact that they agree that it's good for what's happening out there is that at its face only. That is not a change in direction from this council. That is not a change in the nature of the project. It's like saying, we're going to repave your street, or let's repave my street, which I know you don't like either. Repaving a street, maybe I didn't want to budget for that, but I'm getting a new street, so I'm okay with that. So Rivian is okay with this. Yes, they would like to see this happen, but that is not the reason this council moved forward to do that. So let's be very clear on that.
I just asked for honesty and transparency. I don't have a problem with the easement. And honestly, I was surprised when I saw this in there because I was told, and I just despise being misled, that Rivian didn't want the annexation, that they didn't want the sewer and water. That was town staff doing it. And now it comes to say that Rivian desires all this.
Obviously,
you,
Mr. Nord, you didn't listen to my statement earlier. You did not listen to my statement earlier on that. There is no deception. There is no change of plan. There is no deception. There has been no change of plan. This was discussed and passed by a council previous. To get the easements, we've got the easements. We're voting on the easements or not voting on the easements. My advice to you is if you have trouble with this, vote no.
So my question then is, now that Rivian wants this, are they going to be paying their fair share to the taxpayers for extending this out?
Mr. Nord, again, I will say, the fact that the packet said Rivian wants this is not a change in direction from Rivian or the town of Normal. Wants or approves of something does not make them the primary driver on this project. This is a decision we made.
If
Can
they
you
hook
understand that,
into
Mr.
it,
Nord? This is a decision we made.
if they hook into this, will they be asked to pay their fair share, their fair share like other developers and businesses have been asked to pay?
Well, the question can't be answered because it's not a valid question.
Correct, because this easement
We're on
doesn't
this
say
item?
that. But
We're not
in
going to
the future, I will ask that question.
We're not going to go back and forth on this. If you'd like to bring up another point, we'll continue on that. Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to add something different to this conversation. I was invited by the director of the Economic Development Council to attend a site selector conference that was being convened by the state of Illinois. And it was site selectors that are engaged by corporations who are looking to locate businesses and communities. And they were from 3 different areas of the country to give a flavor of what site selectors are looking for when they come to a community. And they were talking about shovel-ready projects and that had everything at them already. And as one of the few government people in the room, myself and the mayor of Bloomington were in the room, we asked about the government perspective and how important it was for a municipal government to be poised in advance of development projects to put in utilities in the winning of businesses to the community. They said, well, the best answer is to have it there in place before any company considers coming to your community, because they know you're already serious. If you're waiting to put it in place, if the council's poised to put them in place as soon as they get in there, and you can give them a commitment within a time certain, that might help, but it's not gonna win against other communities that have already invested in their community. Basically, the site selector said is if the community can't prove that they're willing to invest in their own community, why should a corporation bring their business here? And that, in my estimation, is what we're doing with this whole entire project. And this is from the mouth of people who bring companies into communities like ours to invest and build plants and grow jobs. Not the previous conversation withstanding, I'm very supportive of this for those reasons.
Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That item is approved. That concludes our omnibus agenda. We have one item of general orders. That is a motion to initiate zoning text amendments concerning the regulation of temporary signs.
Move approval?
Second.
And I'm going to caution tonight that we're not here to decide this. This action takes this to a public hearing before the Planning Commission, so the public can have input on this legislation, and then it will come back to us. Discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could jump in and I guess start the conversation. Thank you, Mayor. This item tonight is asking council to authorize for these proposed sign code changes to be on the Planning Commission agenda and start the public hearing process. The purpose of the public hearing process is to get public input so we can end up with an ordinance that we believe is best for the community. The Planning Commission will hear comments from those that have an opinion and choose to share it. And then the Planning Commission will provide a recommendation to council on what that final ordinance will be. This particular recommendation tonight, I would say, is a starting point. It's our attempt to get these issues out for discussion. This is not a comprehensive update of the sign code. These are limited changes right now. Our sign code is quite robust, and this is not a comprehensive review of the sign code. And so I mentioned to the mayor earlier, we could probably spend 2-3 hours going down all sorts of what ifs scenarios about what about this sign, or what about this type of sign, and what about this location. Staff tried to stay relatively high level with this. Basically, we are asking for some modifications to the sign code that reflect U.S. Supreme Court decisions, taking any content reference out of our ordinance, so our ordinance can be considered content neutral. And basically the final conversation, or the conversation that will likely take place with the Planning Commission and getting feedback from the citizens, it pertains to time restrictions, the 84-day limit, does that make sense? Size restrictions and the like. So this is our attempt to, again, eliminate or eliminate reference to content, or vice versa, make our ordinance content neutral, thank you, and which then would bring us into compliance, and then with recent court decisions, and then address some of these other matters through the public hearing process. The public commenter earlier indicated that this request is, I think it was referenced as anti-democracy sign regulations. I guess I would suggest this is absolutely the opposite. This is an attempt to get public input, which typically we're accused of not trying to get. So This is a process where we can hopefully get some public feedback, input, have the planning commission vet the recommended changes and come back with a recommendation to council. It may or may not be this. We don't know. But this is staff's attempt to get the ball rolling. And I'll defer to Mr. Day to see if he has any other comments.
No, I think City Manager Reese summed it up pretty well. I would point out that our existing sign code is currently not in compliance with what the U.S. Supreme Court has said with respect to sign regulations, and that it does have content-based distinctions. In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court came out with a case, Reed versus Village of Gilbert, where they sort of changed the dynamic of sign regulations from a more viewpoint neutral perspective to a content neutral perspective, which caused a lot of issues. There were a lot of unresolved implications coming out of that decision. We've been kind of holding off, waiting until we got more clarification. There was a case that came out last April that gave us some of that clarification, which is why we're going ahead with, at least on this limited basis, with temporary signs, modifying our regulations to comply with what we believe is required under the Constitution.
Thank you. Comments? Ms. Smith?
Just asking for clarification. So the zoning commission will have a single meeting. Planning commission will have a single meeting to invite public comment and then make a recommendation come to us, or will they have multiple opportunities to solicit feedback?
And they do have the option to carry that over if it needs to carry over. Mr. Nord?
What is the specific problem in normal that we're trying to target with Section 6 of the ordinance, which is the section that talks about temporary signs in non-residential areas, temporary signs in residential areas? There's a size limit in residential of 7 feet. They can only be out for 84 days, but it doesn't say if it's consecutive or, just 84 days a year.
4 days a year.
Then there's, in non-residential, they're limited to 1 sign per street. They have to have a permit to have a sign out in a commercial area. So what's the exact problem we have here that we're trying to target?
Well, I'll start and then I'll ask Mr. Day to jump in. In Section 6, this is basically trying to separate out regulations for residential areas versus non-residential, whereas right now it's all combined in the code. So what this is doing is recognizing a residential component, and it eliminates, we've removed the quantity of temporary signs allowed in residential zoning districts is part of Section 6. Anything else that we want to highlight with Section 6?
Well, I would point out that most of what you're seeing, particularly with so in Section 6, it replaces our existing Section 8 in the sign code, which is our temporary sign regulation that applies to all signs. It replaces it with this new Section 8 and 8.5. Most of those existing requirements are already in our sign code. The 84 days, the permit requirement. So we're alleviating that for residential areas. The big issue we're trying to get rid of is, if you see in sections 1, 2, 3, and 4, we've got content-based distinctions when it talks about political signs, real estate signs, and I think they call them general interest signs, being called out for special treatment, and that's what's causing the constitutional problem.
Okay, but in Section 6 specifically, in residential areas, is there a problem with signs being over 7 square feet? I mean, have we had complaints about that? Because there are realtor signs that are not going to fit within there. Some realtor signs have got the, I guess the big section in the middle, they may have their name at the bottom and like sold at top or something else at top, or I hate to give out people's names, but some of them have some fairly, they're not too large, but they're over 7 square feet. Then,
do you want me to wait?
well,
Jump in.
so is there a reason that that number was picked, and why was any size included? Why was that number picked? Was this copied from somewhere? Did you have a complaint? Does somebody just not like over 7 square feet? What is the reason for that number?
I can tell you, Mr. Nord, that I've had complaints about them in residential areas in terms of sometimes people felt that it was excessive in their neighborhoods. Other times they felt that it was blocking their line of sight.
And these were non-political signs you're talking about, you've had
We're not
complaints about.
talking political or not political signs here, Mr.
Well, because this
we're content
section
neutral.
doesn't cover political signs.
We're content neutral on this. We're trying to address all signage.
No, in section 8.5, it specifically calls out a section in the Illinois Municipal Code speaking to political signs are not to be regulated. That's what section C says in 8.5. So 7 foot, let me understand this. What staff is bringing forward, will this apply to political signs, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so we
Apply
are
to all
trying to.
signs,
We're
regardless of the
we're
purpose.
trying as best as we can to treat all signs the same. The
So the
one
sec-
wrinkle that you pointed out in subsection C of 8.5 is the General Assembly has limitations on time regulations for political signs, at least as of now, until that's constitutionally challenged. But we're complying with that with respect to time limitations, but this specifically allows for all of the other time, place, and manner regulations.
Okay, so then this is political signs as well. Now, realtor signs will still fall under 7.
Correct. I was just going to say, Mr. Nord, I just want to jump in, so I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to say real quickly, this would apply to any type of sign regardless of its purpose. Realtor signs, political signs, any kind of signs. And as I understand it, most realtor signs fit within this size requirement. But that's exactly what we'll learn as we go into this process. If this size is too small or not small enough, people in residential neighborhoods tend to be the most critical and concerned with the type of signs that are around their neighborhood.
Okay, I audited, or I asked the staff for a list of all the complaints over the past couple of years that came in through the town's report a problem site. I do not recall one political sign complaint that came through there. I shared that with the entire council recently, so please look through, because I don't see a justification for this. This looks like this is something beyond what the data shows, so I would like to see the data. Then another question.
Nord, the question here tonight is to take this to the Planning Commission, not to approve or not approve this.
Okay,
So
then I'll skip to the Planning
your
Commission
point of
stuff.
issue is that you do not feel this should go to Planning Commission.
Well, I do not think we should put bad policy forward that we have no intent of bringing to the Planning Commission, or that we have no intention of passing. It's a waste of taxpayer time for staff to spend time
I'll
on
put
that.
parentheses around bad decisions as your personal opinion.
Okay. Well, bad policy, I mean, policy's policy. But once we approve this for it to go to the Planning Commission, this will go the same route as One Normal Plaza, where that means the public is not allowed to speak to any of the council members up here. They won't be able to speak to the Planning Commission outside of that public hearing. That was a big problem with One Normal Plaza. When we passed that on, we were told not to speak with them. And we're going to have the same problem. So if we are going to bring this out for the public to get involved, I do not think it should go through the Planning Commission, where it restricts people from communicating with the only folks in Normal that they actually elect. So that, I don't agree with it going through the Planning Commission, because we're just going to go down that same route where people are going to say, hey, my voice isn't going to be heard. Who do I talk to? And we're going to be pointing the fingers at, don't talk to us.
Mr. Nord, could I please jump in on that one? Just real quickly, and again, we don't have to rehash the entire One Normal PUD process, but I absolutely remember, and I probably have dozens and dozens of emails pertaining to this issue. The reality was there were a lot more issues than just simply council members not speaking to residents or residents not speaking to council members. Some residents were being advised to send their comments to staff. And then staff was being accused of not relaying those citizens' opinions to council. And I tried multiple times to get folks to understand that staff cannot be the responsible party to convey every citizen's opinion. That's the purpose of a public hearing process. So it's in everyone's best interest, I would recommend, that residents speak for themselves when they have the opportunity, and they can certainly share their thoughts with council. But the direction a couple years ago was that staff should be the conveyor of the opinion, of the official opinion of residents. And we advised council to be cautious in interfering with the public hearing process and be cautious with expecting staff to be the conveyor of the official citizen opinion. This process, and we can agree to disagree, this process is transparent. It allows people to have an input in opinion and share that opinion, and to have influence on what the final outcome is for the ordinance.
So during this, if this passes tonight, will the public be able to speak with the council, and can the council relay information that we're hearing from the public onto the Planning Commission?
I'll ask Mr. Day if council members can be the official conveyors of a citizen's opinion. That seems a little bit peculiar. I would suspect that council can absolutely receive input, but to be the official conveyor of an opinion and relay that to the Planning Commission is a little bit peculiar.
Yeah, so the issue with the Planning Commission is that is a public hearing, typically due process rights attached to that. Essentially, the town council is the jury for the decision coming out of the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission makes its recommendations, sends it to the town council for the jury, as to sit as the jury for what comes out of the Planning Commission's deliberations. As with any type of hearing, you don't want people lobbying the jury during the trial, which just makes common sense. So there are times when people can reach out to council, usually after the Planning Commission has had their hearing, issued their recommendations. The matter comes to the council, and at that point, council can talk to whomever they want to. But we run into due process issues when council starts involving themselves in the process, in the hearing process before the Planning Commission, when they're the ultimate decision makers in that process.
Okay, so this is going to muddy things again. I've already put out on
Mr.
Facebook.
Nord, you've exceeded your time.
All right.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. Have a couple questions for staff and then some comments. First, I'm not seeing it unless I missed something in this proposed ordinance. What is the definition of a temporary sign? What's considered a
I'm
temporary
definitely
sign
going to
and what is
punt
not?
that to the legal counsel.
That is
That's a good
not in
question.
the ordinance, that's in our underlying code. So that is in section 15.13-4, item 59. Temporary sign, a sign intended to display the commercial or non-commercial message of a transitory or temporary nature. Portable signs of any kind not permanently embedded in the ground or not permanently affixed to a building or sign structure that is permanently embedded in the ground are considered temporary signs.
Okay, so in looking at, my main takeaway from what you said is that it is vague and it is, legal jargon to cover everything that I would anticipate a temporary sign being. in looking at the proposed ordinance tonight, then, section 6, part 8, where it talks about non-residential, I'm thinking about all of the businesses, I mean, gas stations being one example, where you can pull up and maybe there's a sign for firewood, maybe there's a sign that just stands, it has, sandbags on the bottom, it talks about the car wash options, whatever. Do all of those little things at a gas station, for instance, would all of those be considered temporary signs and thus be required to be limited to one sign per street front?
I'm looking at
Yeah.
legal counsel.
And again, let me phrase, that is our existing language. So it would probably be handled with the same way we handle it now. In terms of how those signs are enforced.
Which is that they're not, right?
We don't,
Correct. Complaint
treat
basis generally only.
permits for a piece of paper hung on a door or something.
So I hear the argument that there's a certain piece to this that we have to update as a result of recent court rulings from the Supreme Court that removes the content-based distinction, so they are now content neutral. We can't specify certain kinds of signs, have certain requirements, while other certain kinds don't. That said, this item before us tonight, the changes that are proposed in this proposed ordinance go considerably beyond just that content-based distinction being removed from temporary signs. It actually it then addresses a number of other stipulations that were not previously in our sign code, the 7 square feet being one. And I guess the way I look at this is if it's not just as a result of the court rulings, but that has been a catalyst to then get involved in further regulating signs in both residential and non-residential areas, then there are some things that we may need to clean up if we're not enforcing, certain aspects, though technically how the code reads, they'd be in violation, or, I don't know with the 84 days, how that applies to realtors in a market, like we had a couple years ago where houses would sit for longer than 84. I feel like there are some gaping holes. There are some holes in this thing that it'd be one thing if we were just responding to the courts, but I think this goes far beyond that. And I don't have as much concern about the process going to planning as much as I do that this is the proposed ordinance that was before us to go there.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you. As far as the planning commission process goes, I fully supported an open public meeting process where citizens and organizations have the opportunity to come and speak directly to avoid any political bias that Mr. Day spoke to previously. I've spoken to a couple of organizations. Their business has been, their type of businesses and services have been mentioned already. I've spoken to a couple of citizens about both commercial and residential. I've asked all of those people to please go to the Planning Commission meeting and express their opinions directly to the Planning Commissions as the beginning of the public input process. I just want to make sure that we all understand this publicly, friends in the media and everything, is there isn't an either or going on here. Citizens get to talk to the Planning Commission and they get to talk to their council members. They can talk to everybody. It's not an either or. The citizens get to talk to us. We heard, and I talked to plenty of people in One Normal Plaza about what was going on. And some of them went to the Planning Commission. So the citizens are in no way, and organizations are in no way limited in their ability to provide public input, just so that's out there. Also, what we're doing tonight is to get back to the point in the proposal here is we are starting a public conversation about this. It's entirely possible, my colleague brings up some points that certainly deserve some discussion. But what goes to Planning Commission may not be what comes out of Planning Commission, depending on what the public input is. Talking to one of organization that had some concerns about sign square footage. And I said, please express your opinions and your ideas and your thoughts. And if you have other ideas for us to consider, please express that. So rather than us try to presuppose what other organizations or individual citizens want, I hope we let the public planning process play out. I hope we allow those organizations and those individuals to show up, provide us their actual input to the Planning Commission, and let the Planning Commission do their job, and then make recommendations to us, and that we continue to do our jobs and also talk to those folks. So with that very specific defined process, I'd say I don't want to get bogged down tonight in the details of what we're sending to the Planning Commission, because we don't know what the Planning Commission is actually going to hear. Let's let the public weigh in before we try to weigh in. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Mr. McCarthy, because that was the kind of the admonition that I gave at the beginning here. I didn't want to get weighed down into the details. We have a draft here that will receive public input. It's not uncommon that things that go to the Planning Commission come back with recommendations for changes, for elimination, for additions, things like that. That's all part of that public process. Further on this, Mr. Nord?
I agree with Mr. Preston that, or Councilmember Preston, that this is changing what we currently do. I would be more comfortable if this said, here is what we do, and bring that to us, and then see what we want to change from there. Because some things that are going to be impacted by this, I was driving around, we've got signs up that are over 7 foot in non-residential areas out in front of parks. Banners for these parks programs. Schools, they've got signs up all the time too. People that are hiring out in front of Unit 5, they've got, they're hiring signs. They're on College Avenue. Bridgestone, they've got some, hiring. Those are commercial properties. Yes. But they now have to get permits, and there's only one allowed on that property. Those properties that have got the signs that may be out in front, like the flag type signs that say sale or whatever, they may have multiple of those. Those will be impacted. Leasing signs that people have, when there's properties for leasing, even in residential areas, or like, apartment complexes or complexes. The mayor's bike shop, whenever the folks were out protesting for the lockdowns, that sign would have required a permit. You wouldn't have been able to do that. So those are the restrictions. And I just am not in favor of bringing something forward that people are going to say, hey, this is what the council wants. The language is in there. It's going to be portrayed that way, just like One Normal Plaza. My recommendation is bring this back with exactly what we are doing now. So we're starting from a basis of here's what we do now, here's what we currently enforce. So we minimize all the questions and the angst that the public's going to have with all of this going on. And, then I would be supportive of it. But if it's going to be this big drastic change, then no, I think it's too far reaching. We should limit the policy to something we're at least somewhat comfortable with if we're going to approve it.
Further on the item? Oh, sorry, Mr. Preston, go right ahead.
Right, so if this item is approved tonight, that means that it is going to planning exactly as the proposed ordinance is written. That's included in here, right? Staff, should they so choose, which I've no indication they would, but they still would not have any discretion to make any adjustments in their recommendation of the proposed ordinance ahead of going to planning, if this passes how it is.
This would be the starting point. Staff will continue having conversations with some of these impacted stakeholders to get feedback, ask them to participate in the process, and then we'll go from there.
All right, so for the 84-day max, what happens to the house that sits on the market for more than 84 days.
Mr. Preston, we're not here to have those conversations tonight.
Well, we are. We're here to send it to planning as a process, but we're also here to send this specific proposed ordinance to planning. There's two pieces to this. And so I'm in the proposed ordinance, the 84-day maximum is still in there. It historically, to my knowledge, has not been enforced, though it has technically been part of our sign code to date. For realtor signs specifically is what I'm talking.
I understand.
Since it remains in this proposed draft ordinance, what's going to happen with that moving forward?
I think that's at the planning commission level, that's for the public to put input on. Now, if it comes back to us, and there's enough people on this council who think that is not well spelled out, just because it goes through planning does not mean it comes back to us as the gospel. We can continue to make changes on that. That's why I was just saying, let's get this process moving. This is an ordinance that staff came up with. We could do this forever, and there wouldn't be anything going to planning.
I understand, but the vote tonight is not in general, do we want to send things to planning? It's this specific proposed ordinance, and that's the piece that I'm talking about.
Mr. Day.
Yeah, so the point here really is to send the issue to planning committee. The point of the proposed ordinance is to give them the starting point to work from. There are a couple, we've got issues in there that we expect we'll have to highlight. Staff will highlight issues that we think need to be considered specifically for the planning committee. The first one is the one you mentioned, the number of days, whether they want any time limit or whether they want to, get rid of the time limit, extend the 84 days. That is something we specifically would intend to bring up to Plan Commission. That's purposely a policy decision that we think that the Planning Commission should be involved in making and hearing on. The other big issue on here is the requirement for the permits in the non-residential. I think that's another big flag issue. It's existing in the ordinance because right now it's existing in our current. We've got it in there just as a holder issue, but that would definitely be something we're bringing to the Planning Commission for their consideration as to whether we want the permit requirement going forward. So those are the two probably big purpose issues that we're looking, or big issues that we're looking at bringing to Plan Commission to get their specific opinion on those issues, but there could be a myriad of others, like what you mentioned earlier, the very small signs we talked about, maybe a minimum sign limit before something's considered a temporary sign. That would be something else that may be considered. So there are a myriad of issues that we've got on our list that we tend to bring to Plan Commission. It's not this is what the council wants. It's not even this is necessarily what staff is looking at. This is sort of the blueprint for them to start with, to highlight the issues that we think are going to come up in any discussion of our temporary sign regulation.
Okay, so going back, another question then for you so I understand. On the proposed ordinance, section 6, 8.5 was discussed earlier. It's the temporary signs in residential. Residential is not just single family residential areas, is that right? It's also multifamily. So any kind of for lease sign or, Core 3, whoever, apartment mart management company sign out front, they would all be subject to the restrictions of the residential requirements for temporary signs. Is that correct?
As this is written, yes. Subject to change by the Planning Commission.
Then I guess it's good. I'm drawing attention to the concerns I have now so that they don't. So at least somebody's heard them ahead of it going to planning. Like I said, the process piece of this, of sending things to planning, I don't have as much issue, but I do clearly have some unresolved questions that I just don't think are practical, to be honest, in the proposed ordinance, how it reads, that's getting sent over to planning. I think the additional regulations go too far and are unnecessary.
And you will have your time at the table to address that, Mr. Preston. That's all part of this process. Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. I just want to mention that I received some inquiries, and maybe many of you did too, from the local Realtors Association as well as the Chamber. So clearly tonight's item here to direct this to staff to take to Planning Commission has caught the attention of at least those stakeholders. So I think that's good. I think they've already begun to do some reach out to staff. So I think that's good. And, you know, perhaps the gas station owners might do the same. So although if they might be captured under the Chamber group, maybe some of the multi-family complexes might want to take note as well. This is the opportunity for people and stakeholders with a vested interest in our sign ordinance to step forward into the planning process. And I just wanted to put that out there, that I think this discussion tonight has, and the topic itself being on the agenda, has helped bring attention to that. And have already heard very positive things from some of them, that the fact that staff got back to them already today. So I think that speaks well for the process going forward.
Thank you. Further on the item? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
No.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
No.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The motion is approved. Item 8 is a resolution executing a grant agreement authorizing $50,000 of American Rescue Plan funding to be distributed to community health care clinic, and an authorization of a related budget adjustment.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Reese, you've got some
Yes.
comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Council, this is a follow-up to our December discussion on the American Rescue Plan Act and the funds that the town has received through that federal program. Our allocation is $10.8 million. We budgeted to support the community health care clinic, which is located here in Normal, to the tune of $50,000. We actually budgeted to pay that out in $10,000 installments. In conversations with the community health care clinic, I inquired whether or not they had a preference of $5 $10,000 installments or one $50,000 installment. They were willing to take the $50,000 at one time, which we would prefer to just simply do issue one check. Should council support this? And so part of the action tonight, you'll see in the introduction, we said an authorization of a related budget adjustment, simply to reflect that we are paying $50,000 out at one time rather than $10,000 per year. I'm proud to make this recommendation. We have, I believe, a representative from the community health care clinic here. We also have a representative of their board. Chief McHumer serves as their current board chair. And the community health care clinic, as stated, is located here in Normal. We have historically supported that organization, and the clinic provides necessary dental services and healthcare services to an underserved population in the community, not just Normal residents, but the entire community. They do a lot of good work, and we have supported them in the past with CDBG dollars, and have supported the opening of the dental clinic and replacement of the windows in their facility, which we were just given accolades at this healthcare clinic's recent annual luncheon event. They very much appreciate their new windows. And so basically our recommendation tonight is to move forward and issue $50,000 to the healthcare clinic and let them use those funds to support COVID-related services to their population.
Comments or questions? Mr. Nord?
Thank you. So there's been conversation about this mobile healthcare bus or RV that's going to be just for McLean County that we're all going to be spending, or that we're probably going to be giving money to. I would like to hear what the difference is between the brick and mortar facility that offers similar services and this bus that we're going to be having, because we want to make sure that, you know, the money's going to the place where it's going to get the most use. So is that the brick and mortar or is it the mobile? And what are the differences?
Well, we have not publicly, I'll jump in. We have not publicly talked about the mobile health van, which is an initiative through the Carl Center for Philanthropy, the Tinnerman Family Foundation, and the United Way. I know the city of Bloomington has talked about it and I think committed some of their ARPA dollars. I believe McLean County maybe also has considered that. I will be coming to council to talk about that soon, but they're two different entities and two different services. To date, the mobile health van has been serving occasionally different areas of Bloomington. It has not yet served any specific location in Normal, but I believe they will if we become a funder of a new van that will be dedicated to McLean County. The community healthcare clinic, however, has been in existence and is located a couple blocks north of Carl Broman Hospital, and as indicated, serves a population and will continue to serve an underserved population as well. So I don't think the community, I don't think this is a situation where the need can be met by one or the other. I think there's a great enough need to serve all residents, maybe not even as much as they need to be served, but probably to make a positive impact through both initiatives, a mobile health van and improvements to the community health care clinic. There could be, but I also want to jump in and indicate that we have not budgeted for the mobile health van. We did budget for the community health care clinic. So we're just moving forward with what we had originally planned in our American Rescue Plan report and our recommendations to council. In terms of the mobile health van, that is something I think we can discuss with council in greater detail in maybe one or two meetings from now. Still having conversations with Carl about that. But I would have prepared more had I known that you were having a conflict between the mobile health van and the healthcare clinic. So we're talking two different dollar amounts. Well, but we haven't talked publicly about a mobile health van, so I wasn't prepared to provide council with much detailed information about that till we get that all vetted. Your microphone's not on, Mr. Nord.
I would like to ask the folks at the community healthcare clinic how they're going to use this $50,000 versus $10,000 every year for the next 5 years. Like, what's the difference in the spend?
I think Mr.
Folks are going to say.
I think Ms. Reese is more than capable of answering that question.
She knows how they're going to spend the money that we're giving.
Not in detail, no.
Is no one here to speak on their behalf?
Let me pull up I don't have the grant agreement in front of me. I'm not sure. I'll ask Chief Humer, but the community healthcare clinic has indicated our request of them was to use these funds for COVID-related services to their population. As I understand it, that can include providing testing and health services to those that want to get back to work but need continued testing to provide the negative test result to get back to work. That can also include supplies.
Excuse me, Ms. Reese, I would rather hear from somebody from the healthcare
Chief?
clinic rather than I believe, because that's not as
Mayor?
accurate.
No. Nope. We're not going to get into the weeds on that.
We're not going to be able to ask them how they're going to use this money, whether $10,000 is going to get the public X versus $50,000. I mean, how do we tell our
Staff
constituents
has
what
had
our money's
multiple
gonna be
discussions
used for?
with this organization and can answer that question broadly. We're not going to ask anybody to get in the weeds to give us a budget.
Well, it's not a budget. I would like to be able to ask or to answer our constituents when they say, okay, you gave them $50,000 one time. What do we see for that? versus $10,000 over 5 years.
I think that was just stated.
That's a legitimate question.
That was just stated a minute ago by Ms. Reese in her conversations with the community.
It started
healthcare
off as, I
clinic.
believe, it didn't start off as this is what we're going to do.
Well, Mayor, if I could just jump in and say, staff is comfortable sticking with budget doing 10 grand a year. It just makes sense, though, from an organization for us to cut one check. That's simple. Let's cut one check. I will indicate that the only limitation we've had on them is to use these dollars for COVID-related services to the underserved population. When a couple meetings ago, when council authorized a $500,000 grant to Mark First, we did not ask Mark First to come up and explain how they intended to use the dollars. We just moved forward with the grant agreement as we had requested and budgeted for. This is the same thing. I just simply thought, gosh, let's cut one check instead of 5.
Now, Mark First did reach out, and they answered, gosh, I
Not
know
in a,
that they
not
answered
in
a
a
lot of
public
people's
setting.
questions.
Not in a public setting, Mr. Nord. So I'm just responding to you in terms of when the taxpayers want to know. They didn't hear it at that meeting. They only heard it from me.
Well, I know people have asked me, and I was proud with that vote. But tonight's vote, if we vote no, this isn't a no that we're not giving them $50,000. It's just we're not giving them $50,000 today, and then nothing for the next 4 years.
No, if you vote no, if the majority of council votes no, the community health care clinic will get no funds from the American Rescue Plan Act
Well,
allocation.
I thought you said that it's allocated for $10,000 per year.
Well, if you're
That's
telling
what
me
we're
you don't
doing.
want to support it, we won't cut the checks, Mr. Nord. We're asking council to authorize $50,000 of spend.
Okay, so a yes vote, does it cut them a $50,000 check, or does it get them $10,000 a year for the next 5 years?
A yes vote is $50,000 once.
And then
A no vote is no funding at all.
How do we get back to what's currently budgeted, the $10,000 a year for the
You
next 5 years?
can make a motion to modify, but this is the action on the agenda. And if council votes no, it doesn't happen. You can make a motion to amend.
Does this motion, if it's no, does it state that budget adjustment will be eliminated for the next 5 years?
Well, if you make a motion,
$10,000?
Mr. Nord, it's your motion to make.
I'm just confused. If we don't do anything tonight, if this gets tabled, it's $10,000 a year for the next 5 years.
No, Mr. Nord, I wouldn't do that because I have no idea what council would want moving forward. So I'm not going to spend money if council doesn't support this. You got to give me direction.
All right.
Either yes, you support 50 one time, or you support 0, or you support 10 grand a year. But it's up to council to modify this motion. The motion is on the table. You can modify it, but I'm not going to just listen to council and then just randomly go do my own thing.
I would like
afterwards.
to hear from the other council members as to what they're going to tell constituents that this 50,000 was for versus the 10,000 every year. So I'm going to yield my time.
Harold.
Further on this item?
Yeah.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
I didn't hear. Did you
Aye.
hear his vote? Oh.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Motion, the resolution is approved. Concludes our business. We have one public commenter at the end of the meeting, Liz Burton. Is Ms. Burton in the room? I don't see her. So we'll move on to taking comments and concerns from council before a motion for adjournment. I'm going to go with Ms. Smith and then Mr. North.
Thank you. I just have 2 public service announcements. I received the notice about the July 4th waste collection, but if any citizens who were scheduled to get their trash picked up on Monday did not, just a reminder that the household waste and recycling was all that was collected that day. Brush, bulk waste, and landscape waste will be picked up next Monday, but everybody else should be on the same schedule. I know it's sometimes, I stay tuned to Nextdoor, and people get confused about the collection cycles for Normal versus Bloomington. The only reason that bulk waste, landscape waste, and brush weren't picked up Monday was because of the July 4th holiday. You will get it picked up on next Monday. And the second one is a personal experience. Our smoke alarm was doing that annoying chirp, chirp, and we were inclined to just pull out the batteries and figure something was wrong with it. But when we had it checked out, discovered that a vent was blocked, and the CO2 levels were in fact escaping into our house. And so don't just assume that the battery needs to be replaced, and don't ignore something if your smoke alarm is trying to tell you something. Thank you.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Last council meeting, I talked about the Illinois Supreme Court ruling regarding the lockbox amendment, the Fair Roads Act, and I sent the council, all that documentation or the opinion. And something that I wanted to speak about is when we were elected, the council, not the staff, swore an oath. I just want to repeat what this oath is. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the ordinances of the town of Normal, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of, state your position, in the town of Normal, Illinois, to the best of my ability. So we swore to support the Constitution of the state of Illinois. Well, the state Supreme Court, the highest court in Illinois, said that there are some taxes and fees that must be spent on road projects. The quote says, Cook County and other local governments in Illinois must use local transportation-related taxes on actual transportation projects, and this is the key, on not regular government operations. So regular government operations. Well, if you look at the taxes and fees page of the local town code, it's got a use tax on there. The use tax, it's very similar in language to the same use tax that the Supreme Court said that Cook County had to use on transportation-related projects and not on operations. But what we describe that we use this use tax for is the tax, I'm quoting, the tax supports general fund operations, which is exactly what the Supreme Court said you could not use it on. Then there's a local motor fuel tax on the same page under fees and taxes. It says that this tax supports general fund operations. Again, that language, the Supreme Court said we cannot use these dollars for general fund operations. So, I've emailed Mr. Day to get an opinion on if our budgets are constitutional or not, if we're violating something based on this. I haven't heard back. But based on the oath we swore that we would support the Constitution, that's the way that the Supreme Court interpreted that. So, that just puts me in a position of concern as to are we knowingly not supporting the Illinois Constitution, the oath that we took. Town staff, I've asked Ms. Reese, I shared this with the council before, if she would sign an oath to support the Constitution. She wouldn't, and Mr. Day even gave legal reasoning as to why town directors and managers don't have to do it. So we can't look to the staff that work below us to keep things constitutional. We are the ones that took that oath. So that's my concern, and I would like to know the legal position because I don't want to knowingly get into legal jeopardy because of this. Or, any of my colleagues get into legal jeopardy because of this.
Ms.
Thank you.
Lorenz.
Thank you. I didn't really have any prepared remarks, but I've jotted a few notes in light of tonight's meeting. I'll keep it short. This was really a bad meeting with really a lot of bad moments. And I just wanted to recognize that the amount of innuendos, false innuendos, and just almost mudslinging at times is really disgraceful. So, to those who are listening or may sometime view this meeting tonight, we are not a bad organization. We've got really qualified staff that know how wide to build a bridge. And we are a good place to invest in business. We are a great place to live. We offer a lot of amenities for our community members. And let's not lose sight of that, despite the opinion of one very vocal person. Thank you.
Rob? Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you. Just a couple things I wanted to share. First, to Ms. Reese and staff, I had a neighbor stop me the other day and say our public works crew missed a couple of recycling bins, and they duly filled out the form, and they were happy to report that the next morning, bright and early, those bins were picked up and emptied. And the comment to me was, nobody's perfect, but it's really great to know that how serious town staff takes taking care of our city is, and they were super appreciative. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I caught this posted, and I just wanted to shine a little light on it in the public at a meeting, that Officer Chad Bach was presented with a Meritorious Police Service Award for helping families of officers killed in the line of duty. And his role is that he helps identify what assistance is needed to help families and police agencies in their time of need. And what an important and honorable role he does often in his personal time. And I just wanted to say a public thank you and recognize that publicly in a meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Reese?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. I might jump in and let Mr. Day respond. I do want to touch base briefly, because we've had two meetings now where it has some recent court decisions have been raised pertaining to transportation funding. I have included council in communication about transportation spending, and I understand Mr. Nord's concern, making sure the municipality complies with the law. That's what we do. That's what staff is here for, to make sure the municipality continues to operate in a high functioning capacity, providing exceptional quality services like Mr. McCarthy mentioned earlier, just moments ago, and to make sure that we are setting the town of Normal up for success, always. To be clear, since this recent court decision regarding transportation spend seems to be a topic of concern to many, confusion to some, maybe when we get into the budget process, council might see a couple pages and couple paragraphs in our budget document clarified, so there we can try to eliminate some confusion on the description of the various funds and revenue sources and the like. But to be clear, the municipality is not at risk. We are significantly exceeding our transportation spending each year and spending more on transportation than those specific defined revenue sources coming in that Mr. Nord has referenced. And as I've shared, I'd be happy to sit down with anyone to further explain our budget if there's concern. Regarding a comment that Mr. Nord or that Mr. Day has not responded, Mr. Day, do you have any comments you want to add regarding the town's transportation spend and compliance with regulations?
Well, with respect to Section 11 of Article 9 of the Constitution, so it's that specific constitutional provision just says that transportation-related revenue has to be spent on transportation. It goes on for 2 sections talking about what it considers transportation spending, which is a very broad category, something that we far exceed. I heard something about it can't be used for general fund. There's nothing in either this constitutional provision or the court case that says you can't make transportation funding out of general fund. In fact, everybody, the state, every municipality I know does that, and it would be almost impossible to cover some of the stuff that they consider transportation funding under these provisions. Outside of the general fund. So there's no requirement that you can't spend any money out of your general fund on transportation. So if anyone's under that interpretation, I believe that's incorrect. As Ms. Reese has stated, we far exceed, we're not even close to coming up to the limits of what our transportation spending is under the constitutional amendment. And in fact, there's arguably considerable more spending that we could qualify as transportation spending that we haven't even looked at in terms of justifying that. One easy, for instance, would be this building. The constitutional section specifically says it could be used for multimodal facilities, which would be the maintenance on this building. We're not counting that. So we're far and away exceeding anything that the Constitution requires, and we're well within our legal rights.
Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
That woke the room up. Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned.
Staying in the letter I gave you, right? Huh?